I know I can't be the only one that finds it completely absurd that we're the only species on the entire freaking planet that can't figure out what the heck we're supposed to be feeding ourselves. I mean, I think that right there should basically just prove the point that what we're eating is not the right food, because if we're eating the right food, we would know what we're supposed to be feeding ourselves. But I think the issue here is that we've gotten so far removed from what is natural. We don't eat actual food anymore, and the food that we do eat that we think is natural is completely doused and inundated with a bunch of crap that we're not supposed to be consuming and that is destroying our health. So I want to dive into this topic because I think this is very important. And if you're new here, my name is Jacob, and let's dive right into this. Let's talk about this. So like I mentioned, we're the only species on the planet that can't figure it out. I mean, we have to have all these sophisticated apps. We have to have all these mathematical equations and these formulas and all this stuff to figure out what the heck we're supposed to be feeding ourselves. Yet, you know, even though we're the most sophisticated beings on the planet, or we think we are, we let our big brains get in the way, we can't figure out what the heck we're supposed to be eating. So how smart are we that we can't figure it out? We have all this stuff, we have all these scientific models, and we have all these studies about what we're supposed to eat and what we're not supposed to eat and what's optimal and what's not. But look around. The health of our nation is absolutely destroyed. The rates of every single chronic condition you can possibly imagine are sky high, higher than they've ever been throughout all of recorded history. 70% of the entire population is overweight or obese, and it keeps going up. So what gives? I think we all know exactly what the problem is. I just don't think a lot of people want to admit it, because reality can be kind of harsh sometimes. It can be kind of tough to accept the fact that we've all been fed a bill of lies, and the stuff that we're told is healthy and the stuff that we're marketed and that we're sold is not right. It's not good. It's not stuff that we're supposed to be consuming. You know, they let these companies self-regulate, and they let them do the generally recognized as safe loopholes, and they can test their own products and say they're safe and all this stuff, and they allow all this stuff in the food. Now we've got 10,000 toxic ingredients in all the foods. And then even the stuff that's natural, I mean, there's 90% less nutrients in food these days if you buy it from, you know, big industry. 90% less nutrients because it's grown in nutrient depleted soil. They monoculture and they plant right over top of the crop that was there last time. They plant right over top of it. They don't let the soil regenerate. They don't give it a chance to breathe. And then they douse it with synthetic fertilizer, because otherwise nothing would grow in it, because the soil is so depleted. So what you're left with is a bunch of nutrient void food. And not just nutrient void, but now it's also full of all these toxins, because all these synthetic fertilizers have PFAs and heavy metals in there that go up into the plant. And of course, all the plants are GMO, which a lot of them are GMO so that they can spray as much glyphosate on them as they could possibly desire without any negative consequences to the plant. The only negative consequences that we see are in our health. So we all consume these foods, and they're, you know, covered in all this bad stuff and synthetic fertilizers and glyphosate and atrazine and antibiologics. And then we get leaky gut, and then our health gets destroyed because they're all endocrine disruptors, and they're all linked to cancer and metabolic dysfunction and all this horrible, horrible stuff. And we're consuming this food. So it's no wonder that we can't figure out what the heck we're supposed to be feeding ourselves, because if you don't know the story of where our food industry kind of got started, it's because the people that ran the tobacco companies ended up basically running the food industries. So they're marketing people to buy cigarettes, saying, oh, they're healthy, you know, smoke all this stuff, and they're putting carcinogens and stuff in cigarettes too. And they're doing the same thing with food. It's all the same plot. It's the same ploy. It's to get us hooked and addicted. And there's no regard to our health whatsoever. So when you understand that, it's really easy to see why we don't know what the heck we're supposed to be eating, because people are telling you, eat this, you know, this is good for you. We eat that and our health's destroyed. So it's like, okay, if that's not good for me, what the heck is? Well, I think that's pretty obvious and apparent. And I think it's just as simple as getting back to the basics of the foods of what got us here. Because when you get back to those, you cut out all that BS I just talked about. And when I say there's a lot of BS, I mean a lot of BS. So if you're not familiar, I'm going to put a link in the description below. But I actually wrote a ebook, and I identified over 40, I think it was like 46, or there might be more now, 40 some common ingredients that's used in human food and dog food that are all linked to very, very horrible things for human health and dog health. All right, so a bunch of stuff that we should not be consuming. And this stuff is stuff that they put in food, pretty much every food on the shelf, whether it be dog food or human food. It's found consistently in a lot of different products. All right, and I mean, that's just 46 that's found in human food and dog food. There's over 10,000 ingredients that they put in human food that is probably not very good for our health, because a lot of this stuff is, like you're talking about dyes and all that, I mean, those are made for petrochemicals. You know, it's petroleum-based food additives. So we're consuming petroleum. And 99% of the stuff they put in food is synthetic, or it has no business being in food whatsoever. Like, I mean, there's stuff that they put in food that's in antifreeze. And if you feed antifreeze to an animal like a dog or something, it'll kill it. Or if you consume antifreeze, it will kill you. But yet they put that stuff in food, and they allow it. You know, that's the horrible thing about it. So anyway, all these products that I've identified, you know, that's in human food and dog food, it's the common denominator between the metabolic health for humans and the rates of chronic disease for humans and dogs. Very, very closely related, very correlated. I mean, it's the common denominator, it's the common factor, because the rates of obesity and cancer and all this stuff in dogs, skin conditions, autoimmune conditions, allergies, all these things, the rates are almost the same as with humans. All right, and I'm not saying that dogs and humans are exactly the same, but they're close enough that we do a lot of testing and stuff on dogs for cancer treatments, and a lot of the horrible stuff that we put in food we test on dogs. Unfortunately, it's a horrible thing, but it does happen because they are so similar to us. Their digestive system's very similar, how their body responds to certain things very similar. So, you know, the fact that they're having these health outcomes that are pretty similar to us is very telling. And you know, you could say that it's environmental factors. It's not. It's the food. It's the stuff they put in the food. I mean, their food is definitely much lower quality than ours, but the fact of the matter is it contains a lot of the same ingredients. And like I mentioned before, those ingredients, they are linked to very, very bad health outcomes. All right, and again, I will put a link to that ebook in the description below. Be sure to download that so that you know what to look out for if you buy food from big industry. And I'm not even talking about hyper-processed food. I'm talking about any kind of food, because, you know, a lot of these things are on whole foods as well. So be on the lookout for that stuff. Don't let our sophistication and us, you know, being told here's what you're supposed to eat and everybody's so smart and all these studies, don't let that ruin your health. Do your own research on this. Know what you're buying when you go in the store and buy it. Don't just blindly buy food because somebody says it's healthy. Now for me, when I shop, I don't shop for anything but meat. And most of the meat I get is from my local producer, so I know exactly where it's coming from. I know what's in the food. I know how the animal's raised. It's the least toxic, most bioavailable, nutrient-dense foods that I can possibly consume. And doing that has transformed my health in a very large way. And I will never go back to eating any other way as long as this keeps working for me. I mean, I'm not dogmatic about it. And, you know, if I run into health problems and if it stops working for me, I don't mind adjusting. I don't have to stick to a carnivore diet my entire life. But if it keeps working for me, you darn right I'm going to. There's no sense to go back to eating any of that other stuff, especially considering it's getting harder and harder to find healthy versions of those other foods unless you grow it yourself, or you're getting it from your local producers or something like that, because you can pretty much assume, even if it's organic, the stuff that's in the grocery store is going to be full of a bunch of stuff that you probably shouldn't be consuming. And that's not even getting into the fact that, you know, plant products and stuff like that, they also have phytochemicals, which probably isn't a huge concern for most people as long as you're healthy. But just kind of know that when you consume those foods, you're not getting as much nutrients, because some of that stuff is going to be getting bound up. And some of those chemicals can be kind of problematic for some people. So, I mean, for me, I'm going to stick with meat. But it just blows my mind with the level of sophistication that we've adopted. And we're supposed to be so much smarter about food now. And you got like food science and all this stuff. And you'd think we'd be so much better off. But we're trending in the opposite direction. That's the crazy thing about it. Even though we have all this sophistication now, it's done the opposite for us. And I think that's one of the worst things that's happened to food, is getting science involved with food. And I'm not saying that, you know, food science and science doesn't play a role. I think it can be beneficial. But when you have scientists and people doing studies and stuff that's paid off by a lot of these big food corporations and manufacturers, or even pharmaceutical manufacturers, and they're lobbying for them and they're getting kickbacks, it kind of puts a lot of bias in the equation and makes studies and science and all that a little less reliable. So it's not something I'd rely on. Or even, I mean, even when studies come out, I don't really buy into them that much, because you don't know who's paying for it. You don't know who funded the study. You don't know what kind of biases they had. All that stuff plays a role. But I really do believe that adopting science into food has been one of the worst things that's happened to our food, because that's also allowed us to come up with all these addictive foods, because they use science and they use food science to engineer all these foods to addict us, to make them hyper palatable, to give it that perfect crunch and that perfect sensation, and all these things that's going to keep people buying and coming back for more. And the crazy thing about all this is that if you want to improve your health and you want to figure out what you're supposed to be eating, the fastest way to do that is to just cut out all the crap, cut out all the nonsense, stop tracking your food, stop coming up with mathematical equations and scientific formulas and reading studies and all this stuff, and just get back to the basics of food. Tap into your intuition, let your body guide you, and eventually you'll find what you're supposed to be eating. Your body will actually tell you what you're supposed to be eating. But the first and most important thing is that you have to cut out all the other stuff first. Because when your mind's hijacked, you can't think for yourself, you can't think clearly, and you're never going to get there. And that's exactly what I've experienced. That's how I did it, and that's how I've helped a bunch of people do it as well. And I spent the last year documenting everything I did to improve my health, everything I did to fix myself from all the chronic issues I was dealing with, everything I did, diet, nutrition, fitness, all that stuff. I've documented all that. And I'm going to be putting all that on my website here pretty soon and offering that to the world, because I want to help people on a more personal level. I want to help people more than what I currently am. And this is my way of doing that. So I've taken a lot of time to do this. I've taken a long time to document everything, and it's literally the full blueprint for everything I've done to transform my health. If you only take one thing away from this video, just let it be that if you want to improve your health, if you want to reclaim your mind and take it back from these people who have exploited it and hijacked it for profit, just get back to the basics. Get back to what is natural, and your health will improve by default.